My name is Judy Wu-Smart. I run the UNL Bee Lab, and today I'm just going to talk about a little bit of the hives that we have here in our apiary. So these hives are part of our research and education program. So at the UNL Bee Lab, we do both the research that looks to see how we can better the lives and the honey production and the success, overwintering success of honeybees for research and for beekeepers. And then we also look at a number of ways that we can improve education and so we can better manage these bees. So honeybees are incredibly important for our agricultural system. They're essential pollinators, and they pollinate over 90 different food crops, many of which are our most nutritious foods like fruits and vegetables and nuts. And so these bees are part of a research program that looks at a number of factors that can affect colony health. So in our research, we look at things like landscape and the availability of nutrition, so the nectar and pollen that bees are bringing in. This hive is actually equipped with pollen traps so that the bees going in, actually, when we have the trap on, the bees going in get their pollen loads dislodged and they go in, and then we can collect the pollen here to assess. Here's these little pollen loads right here, so we can see what the bees are bringing back to the hive and what type of nutrition, what type of nutritional proteins and amino acids these bees are getting from different plants. And on here we have a colony that is actually strapped to some scales. So these are a way for us to measure how quickly the colony is growing and how much honey they're producing, so we can assess how successful a landscape is in having the proper honey and pollen available for the bees and what that means for their overwintering success. So if we go down this way, we've got a number of other apiaries like this in different locations. And so all of these hives are part of our research for different graduate students as well as undergraduate student research. This one is another example. We have another example of a research project that's ongoing, looking at monitoring how we can assess the potential impacts of chemical exposures like pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides can impact our bees in a number of ways. So these are called dead bee traps, and it's a monitoring tool that we're trying to develop for beekeepers to better assess whether or not their colonies are being impacted by chemicals and how to better mitigate that exposure through management. So if you do see issues or die-offs or potential problems with a chemical, a pesticide spray, what can a beekeeper do to kind of reverse the impact or mitigate, soften that impact? And you can do that in a number of management ways. So our program is developing and working with beekeepers locally and regionally to develop this program. And then I'm going to turn the camera around to show you another project that we're working on here. This is part of another program research. Not only are we interested in bee stressors, pesticides, pathogens like mites and pest pathogens and poor nutrition are all really important factors, but poor management is also a real strong factor in whether or not colonies can overwinter or successfully survive a season. So one of our graduate students is actually comparing different hive structures and how that can improve colony development and growth. And so I'm going to introduce Courtney. I'm going to turn this camera around to introduce Courtney, and she's going to talk about her research.
Hi, so Judy kind of prefaced, we're looking at different hive types. And so what exactly does that mean? So this hive right here is called a Langstroth, right? So this is a very typical structure that you'll see especially with commercial beekeeping practices. However, we're starting to see a lot of hobbyist beekeepers emerging in the field of beekeeping, and these Langstroth hives can be extremely heavy. Those deeps, when full, can weigh up to 80 pounds, which, I mean, a lot of people can't lift that, right? It's unrealistic. So what I'm looking at is different structures that are easier for beekeepers to manage as far as lifting and inspecting and managing their colonies, but also we're looking at the biology of the bees and how they're able to survive within these different structures. So for example, what does honey production look like? Brood production, so are they able to reproduce well and keep a strong population? And also, how do they overwinter? Because a lot of times we see colonies of bees die over the winter. So we want to look at, are these structures suitable for bees to survive and also for beekeepers to manage them? So this here is a structure that myself and Sheldon designed. We call it the Brumble Box. So it's different because it's a horizontal structure. As you can see, the deeps go side by side, so it's 3 long. And then it also is compatible with a lot of equipment that beekeepers already use, right? So the frames can fit right in, and then you can also add supers on top so you can still have honey production, which a lot of people, hobbyist beekeepers, that's why they're keeping bees, right? So we're really interested to see how these do as the bees move and horizontally rather than vertically like our other structures. So this is one of the hives that we're looking at. Another one is, these are all supers. So most of the time beekeepers use supers just for putting honey in, right? But we're using all supers, and the reason is because they're lighter, so it's easier for beekeepers to lift and maneuver. So we're looking to see how the bees react to a smaller surface area for brood, honey, pollen, nectar, all their resources, right? So this is our second type that we're looking at to see how bees and how beekeepers like that. And then lastly, we have a few more Brumble boxes here, different heights, because again, we want to see how beekeepers like that. And then this is our typical Langstroth setup. So right now we are just putting on deeps to see, how they develop their rates of development for wax production, and of course all those resources that we talked about before. So we're excited to use this for helping beekeepers, and like Dr. Judy Woosmart mentioned, helping with beekeeping management, because that is so critical to helping the bees and to helping out our beekeepers. So.
All right, so Courtney is one of our master's students in our program. We do have PhD students that are looking at the impacts of existing tree lines and how we can mitigate drift from cornfields and all the systemic insecticides that are coming off of the cropping systems. And if we put pollinator habitat, can we mitigate some of that unintended exposure with tree lines and existing landscape features? And then we've got a number of other students working on various aspects, like I mentioned, of bee health and bee stressors. So we're back again. So I'm here with Madison King, who's one of our undergraduate research students, and she is actually involved in one of our University of Nebraska-Lincoln bee care program. So she is an undergraduate student, and she's not in entomology, but you can see she has interest in animal behavior and in entomology and honeybees particular. So Madison joined our lab as a technician and has found honeybees to be so fascinating that she's now starting her own independent project. Her bees, as you can see, Courtney's going to zoom in here, are quite colorful, and they're marked according to age cohort. So part of her research is looking at the different nuances of honeybee biology and the social complexities of their behavior. So she's looking at which bees are doing what function at what age, and we're going to start implementing treatments so that we can actually look at how these bees are responding to some of our syrups, like syrups that's been laced or dosed with a pesticide or a chemical for research purposes. So Madison, do you want to talk a little bit more about wax glands and stuff?
Yeah, so what I'm examining is how neonicotinoids affect honeybee wax glands at different stages of development. So that's why I'm marking them by age cohort, so I can identify them when I'm doing my data collection. And what I'm examining is how the wax glands change. So there's been a bit of evidence that they seem to get a little thicker. So I'm trying to narrow that down and identify what exactly is going on there.
And one of the really key pieces of our research is that the results that come out of our research programs go right into best management practices for beekeepers. So one of the things that beekeepers really we are encouraging beekeepers to do is regular comb replacement. And because regular comb replacement also means that bees are utilizing resources to produce comb, they may not be producing as much honey. So we do want to find a nice balance to encourage beekeepers to have their bees draw out new comb, and that's one way to kind of purge chemicals and residues that might be lingering in the hive. but balance that with economic development. How do you keep your bees productive in honey production and in pollination services, but also keep them healthy by maintaining low mite and pathogen loads, as well as low chemical loads? And that's what we're doing, is really better understanding how we can balance those and then make those recommendations to beekeepers.